Executive Committee meeting of the North County Transit District. Before we begin, I would like to inform members of the public who may be viewing the meeting on the district's YouTube page that in order to make a public comment, you must first connect to the meeting using the Zoom link provided on the agenda. In addition, you must register to speak by sending an email containing your name or phone number and the agenda item on which you wish to speak to clerk@nctd.org. Suhail Rodriguez, our wonderfully efficient clerk of the board, will now call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee Chair Edson.
Present.
Committee Vice Chair Bob Patel here. Board Member Contreras. Board Member Jenkins. Here. That completes the roll.
Thank you. Suhail, please provide a safety brief and review evacuation procedures.
In case of an emergency, I will dial 911. In case of an evacuation, please take the stairs. Do not use the elevators. Once cleared of the building, do not re-enter unless cleared to do so by emergency personnel. There are fire extinguishers and first aid kits on each floor of the building. There's a portable defibrillator on the first floor and staff on hand trained on CPR procedures if needed. This concludes my safety brief.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is public communications. Suhail, do we have any public comments?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Before we proceed further on today's agenda, for the sake of efficiency, I have a couple of quick protocol items to share. First, I ask that board members please hold comments and questions until after each agenda item has been presented. And second, when the time comes for board member questions and comments, please raise your hand and I will call on you to speak. The first item on today's agenda is the proposed calendar year 2023 Executive Committee Work Plan. Karen Tucholsky, Chief Operations Officer, Support Services, will introduce this item and provide feedback from the Executive Committee regarding next steps. Karen?
Thank you. Excellent job. So thank you, Chair, and good to be back working with the committee again. So this item is just to put forth the proposed calendar year 2023 work plan. And if you're able to swing that up there. Excellent. So as you can see, staff is proposing 3 meetings during calendar year 2023. Obviously, the first meeting we are all here for today. The additional 2 meetings that we are proposing are in May of 2023 to receive an update on our draft strategic plan. And then in October, where we conduct our annual review of board policies, receive proposed legislative program for calendar 2024. And of course, always as well in October, doing the annual review for the executive director. And that is our proposed work plan. This is a receive item, so we are happy to take any questions or suggestions that you may have, but not asking for an approval motion.
No, Madam Chair.
Areas of focus, and thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Belatedly, thank you, Karen. And go, Matt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, maybe my guidance should include heat. Can we go to the next slide? So, each year at our first executive committee meeting, we end up having this discussion. It's the framework that we utilize to develop and finalize the budget. And I think, for all of you, you look at kind of the bottom and the top line of the budget, is it balanced? But it's a lot of activities that go into the budget document, from our 10-year forecast to the capital improvement plan, as well as our strategic business initiatives, full-time staffing, equivalents, projections, and things along that line. So it's a really, really comprehensive document that our finance team takes a lot of pride in developing. Next slide, please. This is just a high-level overview of the activity from a board perspective in terms of how do we get to an adopted budget. Obviously, there are steps along the way where the board is expected to provide us feedback. We'll be providing the board information related to the key assumptions and forecasts. and some of the things that really shape the development of the budget. Board obviously will set priorities in terms of things you want us to focus in on, but that kind of outlines the activities to get us there. Next slide, please, Suhel. Again, this is a little bit more detailed timeline of activities, more so from an internal perspective in terms of things that we have to do to be ready for the big show. Next slide. So we do this each year. We go through and I make a presentation and you all give me feedback about what are the things that we should focus on, bless you, as we move forward for the budget for this first year plus the additional 5 years. It's critical that we capture that feedback. We are like a big ship. It is tough to turn that budget into a different direction, so we need as much advance notification as possible. Next slide. So as we head into this budget, particularly from a 5-year point of view, is always my focus because you need to kind of think about what could be happening from a trending point of view and take that in consideration as you develop the budget. And so for us, a number of key activities, the transition of rail operations and facilities management that is expected to be completed this fiscal year, but it lands right on top of the beginning of the next fiscal year. So that's a key activity. I'm planning as part of my budget assumption to include in the 5th year, include within that 5-year projection, the resumption of direct operations for Breeze effective July 1, 2025. So that's kind of the runway that we need from a business systems point of view and other activities to be standing tall and ready to do it. There's some key factors that we do want to keep in mind. Slowing revenue growth. You know, we've all seen kind of the run up of sales tax forecasts, and now they're beginning to flatten out, as well as federal revenues. They're beginning to flatten out. These are the projections that we have for this upcoming fiscal year. Obviously, there's still a lot of challenges in terms of the tight labor market, and as well as inflation that we have to keep in mind. So I've said every year, and eventually I'm going to be right, we have to do some advanced planning for an economic slowdown or recession. That's part of the effort that has to take place as part of this, and we have to have a contingency plan. So kind of the overarching theme for me is we need to complete some of these key priorities, our strategic plan update, the market analysis and ridership growth strategy, business systems and process improvements project. Those are going to be some key priorities for the district that we need to focus in on, as well as moving towards aligning within the new updated strategic plan, which has operational excellence, organizational excellence, community connection, and customer experience as some of the key, the 4 key pillars that hopefully the board will be adopting as part of this budget process. Next slide. So areas of focus. So the top of the list has landed organizational realignment and improvement. This is going to be one of the key factors, and it's like, to me, it's a whole 360 from coming into the agency and needing to do the things that we needed to do to achieve financial stability, and now looking towards being the primary provider of services. We have a lot of work to do. And the organizational structure, as well as some other business improvements, absolutely need to take place in order for us to be able to achieve the goals that the board has established for the district. Technology is going to be a key theme. I know that came up in our PATH committee. Right now, the district is, in some areas we do great in technology, like positive train control. We hit it out of the park. We were one of the first 10 in the country to get the first preliminary approval, and we're one of 4 in the nation to receive the final approval. But we have not modernized our day-to-day systems, and they're not as efficient as they need to be, whether it be from the use of JD Edwards, our use of tools like Microsoft Laserfish, which is our document management system, payroll systems, processes, customer service systems. All of these have to be significantly improved and streamlined. We need to eliminate systems that that are kind of redundant to other systems. We need to focus in on training and organizational development as a foundational principle so that when people come in, we can get them accustomed to working in the way that we need them to work from an efficiency point of view. Obviously, you're going to see some changes in terms of how we are organized and structured today. Some of those changes have started already in motion. So I'll share, for example, we previously had a risk management function under the general counsel, and we always had a safety division. We have now brought the risk and the safety division together as one department. That's part of a reflection of where we're going to go towards the future in terms of making sure that these programs are aligned. As we implement microtransit, that's going to drive programmatic changes and shifts as we want to get better in project management and project delivery. All of those things are going to drive some shifts. But a major theme is going to be collaboration, because we have to move the organization forward in terms of everyone feeling connected and everything that we do, understanding not only the impact to you as an individual or you as a division, but how does it impact the one NCTD approach. Obviously, we need to plan for economic slowdown or recession. And part of that for me is developing a contingency plan, but also preparing the board. Because when I reflect upon this, it's really been since the Great Recession when I got here, was really the last recession that we had. You say, hey, Matt, what about COVID? Well, COVID was so unique because all of the stimulus money came in. That is not what typically happens. What typically happens when there's a recession, everyone is fend for yourself. And I think the boards across the county and probably most of the nation are unaccustomed to kind of the difficulties you face and the difficult choices you face if you have an economic downturn, because you're not going to deplete your one-time money to balance it. It's just not going to be the prudent thing. And for transit agencies, I think you all know this, you either raise a new revenue, which is really hard to do in the middle of a recession, because typically it's not just you, everybody's hurting. You increase fares, that's an opportunity for you to grab more revenue, but typically there's a ridership impact associated with it, or you cut expenses. Those are kind of the three things that you have. And from a practical point of view, getting new money usually takes time. And when other people are hurting, the last thing they're thinking about is giving anybody else more money. So part of this will be an educational process for the board to get you familiarized with the process of how it actually works, some of the challenges that are faced, and how some of the decisions that we make today could negatively impact what options you have available in the future. And so it's very, very important, because at the end, you haven't seen it, and it's heartbreaking when customers are lining up and they're talking about their route being cut, or employees lining up and talking about their job being lost. So that is a part of the process we do need to make sure we undertake as we get into this budget process. It's going to happen at some point. Next slide. Obviously, we need to continue to focus in on growing ridership and improving service quality. And I will tell you that back end of improving service quality is at top of mind for me. We have a long ways to go. Day by day, I'll give the transparent example of the Sprinter, just the struggles in terms of fleet availability and reliability. We have to get better at it. We have to be able to pull out and operate the appropriate number of trains, and the trains that go out in service need to stay in service. On the Breeze service, day-to-day performance issues where quality is not where it needs to be in terms of whether it be the dispatch or the operator or mechanical failure, we really have to push through. And part of that is just within the industry, a little bit of a culture of acceptance of failures as inevitable. We've made too much investment in resources and continue to make investment that we really do have to root out that as a thought process, because every failure should be able to be traced back to an actual cause that can be mitigated. I'm not naive enough to say perfection, but we need to be striving towards perfection and not accepting that failure on a day-to-day basis is inevitable. It's just not the way to attract the ridership that we need. And I think that's going to be a shared effort between me and the board in terms of us really pushing in and leaning on staff to be more accountable. If you look at, for example, for what we've done with on the rail modes with the technical services and material management agreements, those are really foundational agreements. And in fact, if you look at the coastal locomotive performance, it's really going well in terms of that performance with that agreement. The Sprinter, we're just starting, and the Sprinter is a challenge because it's going to take us some time to work through supply chain issues, to identify manufacturers and get the materials that we need to get to a state of good repair. But that stuff has to happen with a sense of urgency. And we have to make sure every step is a step in the right direction. Obviously, we need to advance expense optimization and productivity improvements. And I think this is a challenge for everybody coming out of COVID. One dimension of this was a pre-COVID in terms of how we use technology to garner efficiency. The other side of it is when we do things, we need to make sure we get the benefit out of it and that the employees understand what the goals are, what they're engaging in, what are deliverables, and pushing through to get those deliverables, but also making sure that every position delivers efficiently and effectively to the maximum degree. One of the things that we've done is we've been adding positions. And so now we're coming to a point where we need to stop adding positions and we need to start leveraging positions, and we need to ensure that every position is giving us the efficiency that we need. Next slide, please. I think the board is very well aware of diversifying our revenue sources. And again, the challenge with this is none of this happens overnight. These are really, really good things. And from my perspective, that our goal is over the next 5 years, and we need to be more intentional when we put this up about how many of the redevelopment projects do we think will be, actually in construction or actually generating revenue. These are the steps that we need to take and metrics that you need to be able to manage to make sure that we're moving in a meaningful way towards achieving this as a goal. These are complex projects with twists and turns along the way, but this is the district's best chance for long-term fiscal prosperity is standing up these agreements. Obviously, we need to fund and successfully implement state of good repair and priority capital needs. And I'll tell you, is you can look at these different projects, but the biggest challenge that we're going to have within this region is a governance issue. And a governance issue, and I will just use the P word, a political issue about how do we establish priorities for the region. There's going to be, and it already exists, kind of a big push-pull between, is the railroad realignment tunnel project the top region priority project? And if it's so, what does that mean for all of the other state of good repair projects and capacity enhancing projects that may be shovel ready? We have to get clarity around that, because right now we're competing against ourselves. And in some instances, our federal partners and state partners don't know what the region's real priorities are. And so around this particular topic, I think our board, the MTS board, and the SANDAC board need to reconcile. What is the real priority? Because, this Infrastructure and Investment and Job Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, these are amazing opportunities for the region. But by and large, these are for projects that are ready to go into construction. And the question for us, and I have a specific perspective, you guys know that tunnel realignment project is not a project that's going to be ready for prime time anytime soon. And we could miss out in a once in a lifetime 5-year historic opportunity to really push our transportation program forward. So just parking that as an issue. Obviously, we need to continue to expand outreach efforts and strategic partnerships. We've made a lot of investment in this area, but we need to continue to expand and seek out opportunities to collaborate with others to share costs and benefits, whether that be with an agency like Metrolink or with FACT. If there's an opportunity to create real meaningful collaboration that's beneficial, we should look at that. Next slide, Suhail. So we are coming around to the committee discussion and direction. So obviously the board will need to provide the executive director as well as all of staff kind of feedback and direction upon is this the right course or are there additional things that we should consider as we move forward. Based upon the feedback that we get today and at the subsequent board meeting, we will then use that to shape the high level arches of the budget. Next slide. So this is staff recommendation, but obviously at this point, it's for you all to give us feedback.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Suhail, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Matt, thank you so much for reviewing this item. I know we receive an update on an annual basis and it's always a little different every year, and that this is a big kickoff for a lot of work that the board and the executive board will be doing for now and through June. Okay. Are there any questions or comments? I see heads nodding. Should we just start at Sharon's end or? Okay.
Couple questions. So who has the magic 8 ball about the recession? Topic? Because we have been talking about it for several years now.
Yeah.
So how do you determine, what do you look at to say, okay, it's here or it's not?
Well, I think the truth of the matter is, like for me, now that you're seeing sales tax revenue slowing, the rate of growth slowing, that kind of tells you you're moving there. I mean, no one could accurately predict, because some people say by all metrics we should be in a recession right now. The bottom line for the district is you have to have a contingency plan. So you have to know what levers you're going to pull based upon different levels of scenarios that may come about in terms of sales tax decline. And that's going to be really what our focus is developing those scenarios.
Okay. So you don't know what it's.
No, ma'am.
And then you talked on page 6 about the changes to the service delivery model, the breeze, Electflex and all that. So, we've had a couple issues recently with Lyft. What is your plan to address that?
Well, without getting into those specific, because they have different narratives, but I think part of the whole discussion about Lyft and microtransit and those types of services, we have to stand up infrastructure. So part of what's happening in this budget will be a reallocation of a position to identify a program manager for mobility services. So big, broad brush, kind of broader than what you ask, I'll delve into, is if you take our breeze, speed, and reliability study where we said, hey, we want to optimize, reduce the number of routes, but speed up the frequencies on that. We want our trains to run on higher levels of frequencies, and we want to fill it all in with high-performing microtransit. And what we would like to be able to do with the microtransit program itself is to create more opportunities for freedom of mobility for people. And that would mean that maybe in some instances for someone, depending upon the nature of your disabilities, that you may not need specialized Lyft service, but some people will continue to need specialized Lyft services. So we're going to try to create different types of platforms that will make available. For example, we're going to look at a pilot project, likely with FACT, where people will be able to pay maybe the first $5 will cover another thing, a secondary dollar amount, and they'll be able to take a trip that's no longer than X number of miles. And that will address kind of the need for people who have short distance trips, who may be trying to go to the grocery store, and they just want to be able to book that trip to the if that service is available for them. So our goal is to create more freedom of opportunity for people. but also respecting the fact that there are going to be some people who always are going to need lift because of the nature of their disability. And so we need to make sure that that service, all of that service, is high performing, and that we have different levels of providers that reflect the need for support or protection.
Got it. Board member Contreras.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I know it's difficult because there's so many indicators that show that we are either struggling economically right now or could be struggling even more economically in the future. But if we know anything as elected officials, we know that our constituents are already hurting because of the cost of everything going up. And the segment of the current population that utilizes our transportation services, when we're looking at how are we going to balance it, increasing a fare just, I don't think is going to be the most appropriate way. But with that said, looking at the different options that we have, it doesn't really seem like we have a lot of options on the table. So, I'm curious to see, because I was at a meeting on Saturday that San Diego 350 had regarding microtransit, and the Metro Micro in Los Angeles is incredible, but it also comes with a higher cost. So, but it's an incredible service. People can get to actually connect to where they need to go quickly, and it really plugs a hole in some of the arguments against public transit that, I guess it's people that don't ride transit that don't know that people already use public transit to go to the grocery store and take their families with them. But microtransit really can plug in that goal, that gap. So I 100% believe that this is going to be incredible here in North County and that we need to do microtransit. So with that said, I'm trying to figure out what the connection is between, trying to move away from maybe this 1970s idea of what public transit was going to be here in California into where we're trying to move into the future, which is we have certain segments of the population right now, 18 and under, that have free transit. There's a push to have 24 and under for free transit. So really, TDA is not the formula for how we get money, isn't really matching what our goals are. So for the long term, what is it that we're doing at the state level to actually implement some kind of reform to this 1970s style of thinking? And how can that help us? How can we just push on that better as an agency? Because I haven't really heard a briefing on what we're trying to do or what the goal is or when the next meeting's going to be for TDA reform.
Yeah, well, so there's a couple of different dimensions of TDA reform, right? Some of it is around rules, fare box recovery, things like that. And that's actually moving at the state level. TDA is one of the most flexible forms of money that we have. So if I go back to kind of what I think the core of your question is around the ability to fund free fares and things like that, that is, you could do that with TDA, but that's a pie discussion, i.e. you got this pie today.
Right.
And so your pie would need to be bigger to fund that. And so that's a matter of increasing taxes or potentially growing revenues from other sources that you can do it. And that's one of the difficulties with this, with the program itself, because as we all say, free fares ain't free. There has to be an underlying source to pay for those fares and to maintain them. And as you kind of alluded to this whole discussion about the 24 and under, if you listen to the scale and scope of that cost for that $30-something million plus, that's a really big cost. And if you do it as a one-time cost, that's a really big cost for a one-time cost going into this level of economic uncertainty. So primarily, I would say that if the goal is to raise revenue to be able to fund free fares, that's primarily a local sales tax initiative that would likely be the funding agent for that. I would tell you from a staff point of view, what we were working on and what we think is something that should be looked at is targeted fares towards towards folks who need that discount. Because while it would be great to give it to everyone, it's not realistic. When we start thinking about like micro transit, there's no way to make an Uber trip $1, right? So we do need to prioritize where we put the money, because I think most of us would agree that someone who's trying to get to his job and who's making not a ton of money should be able to capture a little bit from a public service of the benefit of a reduced fare compared to me, as an example, or a kid who is eligible to receive reduced or free lunch should be able to get the benefit of a lower discount as opposed to my kid. And so I think what the board's going to have to start thinking about is when we talk about these policies is the nuance. We can have these aspirational goals over here, but aspirations, as we know, don't pay the bill. And then within trying to move towards our aspirational goals, what are the things that we can try to do and to kind of help folks most in need of that support right now? That's where we were approaching this, is something more targeted in the absence of, a local sales tax initiative that specifically provided a funding source for that thing. And remember, that's a really difficult thing, because if you do free fares, that sales tax or whatever that source is has to grow commensurate with expenses.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult decisions to make with a limited amount of money, right? But to grow ridership, we've seen that the Youth Opportunity Pass really has advanced that part of our goal. So it's like, we want to be able to have everything on the table, but we just don't have enough money to cover everything on the table.
Yeah, and I know, I think the chair and I have exchanged emails on. Look, yeah, so I will say this: quality of service is going to be the most important thing for transit agencies going forward. Fares are a secondary thing, because if the service isn't high quality, getting you where you want within a great time frame, it won't matter long term. It just won't work. And I think where we're not having a more robust discussion is, Karina, because you ride the system, the frequencies are not great.
Right.
Okay. And, to go back to the discussion we were having before, the trade-off between, for example, do I cut your service or raise your fare? I'd rather raise your fare than cut your service, because you still have the opportunity to get to your job. Okay. And so one of this whole things that we have to do is, on a board, we need to come to a consensus around what we're going to be about. So what I'm going to be recommending is what we're going to need to be about is high quality service that gets people where they need to go. We figured that out as the top priority, targeting, where we can do fair discounts to people who need it most, and then let everything else that we aspire for hopefully happen for us over time. That's where we have to settle. We have to figure out which direction we're going to go, because the metric that we're using right now for the YLP, it's been great from the executive director's point of view, from a ridership recovery. I think as Mr. Orlando comes up, you're not going to, when you benchmark that against where we were, no, it's not, out of the world changes, but it's been great as a tool. And then the question would get to, if it were my $35 million for the 24 and under for one time, would I spend it that way? I would tell you the answer is no, I would not spend it that way. There's tons of things that we could do to improve the customer riding experience that would be a higher priority to all customers, and attract new riders and attract more riders who would be paying to help support the overall system improvements for people who can't afford.
Right. And I mean, the thing is that we have to have a model where transportation works, where it is a quick trip to the bank or to the grocery store and not a 2-hour
Absolutely.
round trip, right? And so, even looking at the North County CMCP, it's, the majority of our trips are within this region. It's like, what is it, like 7 miles or less, right? And so I think being able to, within our own jurisdictions, give people the freedom of mobility to decide, hey, you know what, it's actually more convenient to take public transit than it is to take my car. And, one of the targeted discounts I would hope that we can move forward with is really making it easier for families to utilize public transportation, right? Whether it's a reconfiguration of the Pronto system that allows you to have like a wallet that includes a pass for your children, right? Where it's just one tap, and you can get, the discount if we have YOP 18 and under. And it just makes it really easy instead of every kid having to have their own pass, right? So it's bundled together. I think we could see exponential growth if we are able to provide more frequent, reliable, and safe transportation at the extreme local level. And one day, some of the bigger projects will allow us to really create faster trips between North County and further south, right? But I think being able to focus on creating this new type of mobility as a service for folks here in North County is going to be critical. And, one of the things that I would really hope is that we don't take a decade to get a BRT here, right? That we have a bus rapid transit system that isn't just in Escondido, but connects all of North County. So, taking a look at what Sandag is proposing, which is there's only funding for planning BRT that connects Palomar Health with the Sprinter station at Nordal, and then the transit center in Escondido. That's great. But I'm looking at, the 303 and the 305 being extremely popular, especially with YOP. And I don't see a BRT that's scheduled for trips between Vista and Oceanside. And I think that's critical. So in any case, I would love to see more funding go towards how we're going to plan more BRT here in North County, because I think from what I'm hearing from you, BRT and microtransit together are going to fill the gap of the frequency issue that we have. And it really is a serious issue, because I think, the more frequent we can make some of these high demand routes, the more reliable it's going to be. Because even if something happens, we can't, say there's going to be zero mechanical failures. Like, I hear you when you say that. Like, these machines are going to eventually, just like your car, you can, keep it in tip-top condition and then something happens and it breaks, right? But if we have a bus coming every 10 minutes, it's not as critical to someone that they, miss a bus and they don't have to wait 30 minutes or an hour for the next one. They know that, what, it sucks, I missed this one, but there's one coming and it's like 9 minutes away right now. And I'm still going to be able to get to my job on time or to my, extracurricular activity on time. So I really would like to see North County Transit District have more discussions about BRT, right? I think that's important. And then when we look at key stakeholders, right, when we're trying to expand our outreach efforts and strategic partnerships, I haven't heard anything about the business community. So I want to ensure, if we're trying to grow our revenue, is there a different type of service that we're not providing now that we could provide at a higher cost because we have a strategic partnership with some of the larger businesses here as transportation as an expense continues to increase for individuals? Could we partner with some of the larger businesses here and figure out a way to get their employees to and from, a certain spot where they then are able to pay some kind of what I would consider would be more of a premium for that versus putting the financial burden on everyday ridership, where we see on the breeze, a big bulk of our customers right now are making less than $65,000. And then there's like another big percentage that are making less than, 15,000. Right. So I want to be able to hear a little bit more about strategies like that, especially as we continue to grow businesses in Carlsbad or in my city, right? Wherever it might be here in North County. And then I had another question. So when we're talking about areas of focus in this organizational realignment and improvement, I'm curious to understand what we're doing to advance bilingual capabilities of this agency. And I know that we don't have a ton of funds, right? You're talking about we've already added a lot of positions, and we're going to have to map out, how those positions are helping us move our goals forward. But what are we doing on the customer service side to ensure that our customers have a seamless way to contact this agency if they speak a language other than English, with the bulk being Spanish, right? And are we properly compensating our employees here at NCTD that can provide that bilingual service? Because I think that's incredibly important from a customer service perspective. And I have a suspicion that we currently don't have a model that actually does show our employees that have a bilingual capability that they're extremely valued at this organization, right? So I would like to plan for that as well.
So my recommendation is we're going to bring that topic to MISBA, where you chair.
It's going to be a 5-hour meeting, I can tell you right now.
I think we have more information than what maybe you think. And so I think as we compile the information, because there's a lot of requirements around having the ability to communicate across all populations that exist within our service area. So that's going to be the appropriate forum. But before we do that, we're going to send the information about our program to the entire executive committee.
Perfect.
Yes. Yes.
We're very aware, we're a member of the bilingual, need to do more on bilingual. And actually, just over the last 2 weeks, we've done Spanish language pop-ups at some of our key transit centers. And the goal there is really to interact with customers in Spanish. We've had personnel on site that spoke Spanish, and really around the buying of the monthly pass. Because there's a lot of confusion within the community about the buying of the monthly pass. And so we focused those Spanish language pop-ups at a time of the month when folks are buying their monthly passes. And so we're there on site at the transit centers, communicating in Spanish. So just one small example. We need to do more, to your point, but that's one of the things we've done in the last month to help with the topic you're talking about.
Awesome. And I look forward to hearing this conversation come to MISBA. So thank you so much. And that's all I have. And I just want to reiterate that it would be amazing if there was a feature for families to be able to travel seamlessly, where you could just click, you have uploaded your entire family in your Pronto, wallet, and then you can just click, these are the folks with me, you tap it and you're on and off. Right. So anyways, thank you so much. I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you. Great questions and comments so far. I think that we're kicking this off pretty well. In fact, Board Member Bhat Patel said all of her questions and comments had already been made. Good job. I do have a couple of comments and questions. So, and much of it is just not so much piling on, is maybe expanding on certain things. So quality of service and frequency and safety. So as Matt knows, on Friday, I had jury duty. So I hopped on the 7:01 a.m. coaster from Solana Beach and went down and barely squeezed in time to sign up at 7:45 at the courthouse. And they, of course, dismissed the jury members who weren't chosen 10 minutes too late to catch the 11:20 coaster. And there's that delay between 11:20 and 1:20. That's 2 hours. So I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. Maybe I'll just take the mid-coast. I've been meaning to do that. And yeah, it's slower, but whatever. And I can take it to UTC, hop on the 101 bus, and that'll take me to Solana Beach Station. And, I've completed my loop. Well, the mid-coast arrives 2 minutes after the 101 bus departs at UTC. And the delay is 25 minutes between getting to the next one. So I think that that's where we work with our partner like MTS to try to make things more functional. I know it's
No,
string
that-
theory all the way up and down.
No. There's no string theory. That is just an oversight. And I'm glad you're bringing this up to me because I hadn't heard that, because what will always happen is when you have trains and buses is the need for buses to know when to hold for a train.
Mhm.
Okay. And so that is something we will look at across the board to make sure that we have adequate information, because the way that you actually manage that is you have essentially a screen from MTS where you can see that the train arrivals and departures time to make sure you tell your 101 driver to please wait for this train to arrive plus X amount of minutes. So it's both a scheduling and a day-to-day operation service management issue that just should not happen.
Well, I wasn't the only person that waited for that 101 bus. I could have, however, as I was on the way up, I looked at it and I thought, okay, this was a great idea, but I know I'm going to get stuck. So what if I get off at the VA or if I get off someplace else? But what didn't exist was any way to tell me, okay, I can get off here to catch the 101 bus. And in order to do so, I need to walk from here to there and how to get there. So I had a little bit of fear of getting off at the VA and getting stuck because I didn't know if the next 101 was going to be one that went past the VA, right? So I'm trying to figure this all out, why I'm en route, because I didn't do any forward planning because I didn't know what time they'd dismiss us from jury duty, but I'm sure I'm not alone. And living places where they do have great public transportation that's very connected and where you have a lot of options. Those are things that I think are missing. So I enjoyed the mid-coast ride. I probably won't do it again if I have the opportunity to actually get on the coaster. And that's the same for Sandag meetings, right? We have an opportunity to go down to a Sandag meeting, but sometimes we have to sit 2 hours waiting to come home from a Sandag meeting. That's silly. So I highly encourage those gap coasters to happen, especially that one. Safety. So I've been riding the coaster lately, and the conductors talk to me because I have this badge that says board member. And so there are some concerns being voiced about safety for the conductors right now. And I'm hoping that that's something that will be taken care of, because with those 4 pillars, we've got operational excellence and organizational excellence and customer experience. Those all involve safety, right? So we have to make sure we keep our staff and that they're and our clients.
So that's part of big investments in our budget. From us putting the facilities, I call them community facilities at Vista and a couple of other locations, building that out to enhance the law enforcement presence. We're also advancing in RFP for private security services that we are going to be deploying more. Plus, we have the code enforcement positions that we have restored back into the district's budget. Safety and security is like at the top of mind for us. And I think all of us, you all represent the cities, know this is a heightened issue of high priority for all of our constituents. And so trust me, we're definitely making significant investments. We already made the investments with the sheriff's department. Unfortunately, from a staffing point of view, it's a struggle for them to be able to add the additional resources that we need, but no doubt about it, we need to get those resources in place. And we're hopeful by this summer, fall at the latest, that the private security element will be in place. I think we have another location, I think Buena Creek, in terms of another community facility building going in at that location as well. So we're going to continue Oceanside Transit Center. We're actually going to repurpose the Burger King building. We're going to repurpose that as a community where people will be able to see more law enforcement presence and support operations. So loud and clear on that.
And for the train and bus drivers, is there a suggestion box or anything like that where they can actually drop a suggestion or
all of those, so we now formally were required to have safety committees.
Mhm.
We had them before in different fashions, where they do have representatives that are supposed to bring those issues into those meetings. So, but we're already, so I'm not going to sit and say we're unaware of any safety issue on the coaster. As we enter into like this Padre season,
Mhm.
you got, between the sheriff's department, last year, we started using, stand-up emergency support to help us with some events. All of those things have to be put into place. And so it's at the top of all of our minds that we need to move with a sense of urgency in terms of filling these positions that we've added or getting these contracts procured that we need to have for services.
Okay, and it's not just all safety and security. The people on the ground see what's happening with customers, right? And good customers, bad customers, in between customers, it really doesn't matter. But I think that they have valuable information to share, and maybe they don't feel comfortable going to their supervisor or, that sort of thing, but they might fill out something and throw it in a suggestion box that they don't have to identify themselves.
Yeah. I mean, we do have various different forms. In fact, we have a safety culture survey
Mhm.
that the employees complete, anonymously. But again, the more is better. And I do think, pre-COVID, one of the great things that we were doing that we need to restore was we were having the offsite meetings with the respective employee leadership and their labor unions. And those, and in fact, Chair Kranz, when he was with Tony, when he was the chair, he actually attended. Those were like really, really good meetings because the information sharing is great in those meetings, the level of candor that goes on in this meeting, actually learning on both sides. And so that is something that we will be starting back on that journey, because those are the best opportunities, because you get the senior operators in the room. They're giving you kind of the ground level truth of what is happening. And so that is going to be something I think is the best tool for us to get really good snapshot of what employees are feeling out there.
That's great. It sounds like you're on top of it, and that I'm not giving you any new ideas, that you're already heading in that direction. With regard to the TDA reform at state level, I do think that we need to continue to reach out to our state level electeds, and even with local electives, to put pressure on our state level electeds to look at reform. And targeted fares, I understand where you're coming from, but we will continue to debate this. Because I think that if we spend so much of the treasure trying to qualify people as to whether they can be, at this discount or that discount or free, we may spend as much money trying to figure out who gets what as we spend allowing those free fares.
And that is a great hypothetical if you're not able to tap into a state database that has already made that determination for
Okay.
you.
Okay. All right. Well, those are my comments. Anything else? Oh,
So it sounds like based on some of the comments that were made, it all kind of centers around the quality of service to a certain extent. Would you agree? To a
Well,
certain extent.
I would wrap
Some
it
of these
together. I would tap it into organizational excellence and service quality. You can't you can't separate the two.
Okay. Okay, and then, question for you, Matt, looking at a higher level, have we provided enough 35,000 foot level on the direction you want?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
For the 3 items,
Yes.
just checking.
all right. As this was an informational only item, there's no vote required. And the last item on our agenda before closed session is a discussion of the Youth Opportunity Pass pilot program, which is sort of a nice segue from here. Along with the entire board of NCTD, I've expressed strong support for YOP. It's an excellent approach to introducing youth to public transportation. Chris Orlando, our Chief Planning and Communications Officer, will review item number 3. Please, Chris.
Thank you very much, Chair Edson. We're nice and warmed up to talk about the Youth and Opportunity Pass. So I'll dive right in. First slide, please. So as the committee knows, the Youth Opportunity Pass was developed by Sandag's Social Equity Working Group as a part of the 2021 regional plan. It's funded through Sandag with participation from the County of San Diego. It provides free fares to youth 18 and under on NCTD and MTS services. And currently funded, the current program is funded through June 30, 2023. Next slide, please. At this point, I think the committee is very familiar with how it works. So this is just a rundown of how the program works. Again, 18 and under, really 18 to 6 years old, because under 5 would ride free anyways with an adult. Breeze, Sprinter, Coaster, Flex, MTS, and bus and trolley. And the one requirement is that the youth have a Pronto card or Youth Pronto app to ride. So that's kind of the one requirement. And then with that card or app, the youth are able to ride. So that's been in place since May of last year and been working well as has been discussed already among the committee. So let's look a little bit at that program results. So next slide, please. So these are some of the results from the pilot program on NCTD services. So has been alluded to, very successful. So from April of 2022, right prior to the launch of the program, you see some of the increases in youth usage of Pronto that we've experienced on NCTD. Sprinter and Breeze really peaked in the September-October season. So correlating to when school's in the high school usage for the program, and then Coaster peaking in July for youth using the Coaster service in the summer months. So the second bullet there references unique IDs, and what that means is unique youth users. So every time a youth rider uses a Pronto card on the system, so this tracks with that usage. And you see there's been strong increases across all the modes and really showing that we've attracted new youth riders to the system, which was really strong results and I think evidence that the program's working as intended. Youth are riding, and that's a great thing. Next slide, please. So this slide shows sort of that trend over time. So the real increase came at the launch of the Youth Opportunity Program. So from that April baseline, real big step ups through May and June as we pushed the program. When school got out after June, we see a little bit of dip in the ridership, but then peaking in July, and as school gets back in August, and then being pretty consistent throughout the rest of the year. The dotted line there is the trend line, which when you look at trend lines, you like to see that one headed in the right direction and pointed as we like to see it. The results have flattened a little bit, but you would expect that in a program as it matures, which this one has over the last 12 months, or I'd say 8 months. Next slide, please. So this slide shows how the youth ridership fits within our overall boardings, right? And where that contribution to ridership has come and what it's looked like. So what you see in the green there is the youth boardings throughout since August, and the share of total boardings on the whole system. And that's gone from 6% to 11%, which is a really strong increase in the youth ridership, and a strong percentage of our total ridership being 11%. Important context, though, it is 11% of the ridership. So as we talk about the youth program and we see those really big percentage increases, it's important to know that in terms of total ridership, it still is a small slice of the pie in terms of all of our boardings. Next slide, please. So where are we now? So what's the status? There's been a lot of discussion about the Youth Opportunity Pass over the last several weeks. So as I noted at the beginning, the program is currently authorized through June of 2023, so a couple months further. SANDAG has announced both at its recent Transportation Committee and at its most recent board meeting their intention to extend the program for a year. What the executive director has indicated is that they intend that to be included in the SANDAG's FY24 budget as a request to the SANDAG board. And so that's sort of where it sits at this moment. Next slide, please. To date, SANDAG has not indicated the funding for the program that they would use to do that extension. What SANDAG has indicated to us is their intention to use Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Improvement money, or CMAQ funding. CMAQ is a program through the Federal Highway Administration. It's administrated through the FHWA and the State Departments of Transportation. So here in California, that would be Caltrans. And so the use of these funds ultimately would require approval from Caltrans to use funds for that purpose. Our understanding is SANDAG has made that request, and that request is in process. And that if approved, that would be a source of funding for the time extension. Next slide, please. We're hopeful they can get there. We've been in active conversations with them, and I would say active and daily conversations with them about this funding, because we know how important this program is. Recognizing that the time frame for the two activities that I noted to extend the program, both the SANDAG board approval and the securing of funding, will take some time. SANDAG and MTS and NCTD are advancing agreements to extend the program by 2 months so that we leave a little bit of breathing room for SANDAG to verify the funding and for the SANDAG board to approve it as part of its fiscal year budget. So MTS has executed that agreement with SANDAG, and we are extremely close to doing that here at NCTD. We're trading document right now with SANDAG to do that extension. That action does not require board approval by SANDAG, because when they originally approved the YOP program, it had that provision in it. So this is just extending the program timeframe by the 2 months through August. So we're hopeful in the next few days we're able to get that done. That'll allow some breathing room for SANDAG to get the budget approval from their board and then verify the funding through the state. Also, as has been noted, the County of San Diego passed a resolution expressing support for not only extending the time frame of the program, but expanding the age range of the program up to youth 24 and under. So that was a board resolution passed in February by the board of directors of the County Board of Supervisors. The SANDAG executive director has expressed support for that program, both at the February 17th Transportation Committee meeting and the full board meeting on the 24th. So just that's an added point of context that came up in the prior budget discussion, but just a little additional context. So what we wanted to do, in addition to providing you an overview of the program, is just put forward some policy considerations for the executive committee as we continue this discussion about the Youth Opportunity Pass and its future. yeah, you got a little bit spoiler alerted on this, Matt. Matt sort of introduced some of these points already, but we'll go through them and we can continue the discussion. So next slide, please. So some of the key policy considerations, I think, the board will be looking at as the future of YOP and this program is considered in the coming months is the effectiveness of youth fairs as a ridership growth strategy versus increasing frequency is some of the discussion that the committee's already had. Like, when we have more service, when we fill those gaps, is that a better strategy for increasing ridership, or are the free fares better strategy for increasing ridership? So having that discussion about what are the trade-offs when we do that. Funding, there, as Matt has noted, there is a need to identify a permanent source of funding for this benefit so that we're not, giving it 1 year, taking it away, giving it the next year as one-time funding sources run out or come ebb and flow. So really the need to continue this program and to do it in a way where it's got a permanent source of funding and how that permanent source of funding would be identified and secured. Good discussion already happened about the fare box recovery inconsistencies and the requirements we're under around fare box recovery thresholds and how the free fares program impacts those fare box recoveries thresholds. All things that can be addressed, but at this point there are some inconsistencies with some of our funding requirements, other requirements for federal, state, local, in terms of our fare box recovery thresholds. Those things can be resolved, but at this point, there are some inconsistencies that we do have to address. Next slide, please. First point, it's been touched on already in the budget discussion, just the fairness of and the equity of providing sort of a universal age-based benefit versus a more targeted needs-based benefit. So already a good discussion started among the committee around that topic. So I think, the point of this bullet is just to continue that notion. And then service levels, the committee also talked a fair amount about the trade-offs in some ways, unless and until new sources of funding are identified. In some ways, this is a zero-sum game. So if you take funding and you apply it to free fares, does that trade-off mean less service or an ability to expand service? So these are policy discussions that the board could be having. And then just generally, I think the budget discussion painted a rosy picture of our economic future, or at least presented some uncertainties ahead. So just the financial stewardship of having this discussion, particularly when it comes in a time when we do have some economic dark clouds on the horizon, or at least we're looking at those now. So just putting that as another point that's worthy of policy discussion as we consider the go forward of the Youth Opportunity Pass. And with that, I will close the presentation and open for questions and discussion.
Thank you, Chris. So Hal, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to start at this end and give Director Bhat Patel an opportunity.
Great, thank you. And thanks for the presentation. Yeah, just a few different questions. And it sounds like you might have answered one of mine during the presentation, which was there is a plan to extend this past the June deadline. It's just a matter of the SANDAG board now adopting a matter to fund it via, I think it was, and I'm going to look back so I don't butcher it. The CMAQ program funds, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So our understanding is that they are in process on getting approval for that funding.
Yeah.
So they're working on that. So in the short term, our go forward is to execute a 2-month extension. So there's time for them to get through that process and to get through their board approvals. And they've indicated their goal would be to extend for 12 months.
Okay. And during that consideration, will they also be considering the increasing the age up to 24, or are they only considering the 18 and under currently? So
in the February 17th Transportation Committee meeting and in the February 24th full SANDAG board meeting, the executive director did indicate his desire to expand it. We haven't seen a proposal, what that might look like or how that might be funded or what the timeframes, anything of that nature. But he did indicate in those meetings that his desire was to extend it or
Okay.
expand it.
And I think just for clarity, because the discussion around that was that's the 35 million plus.
That's the 35 million plus. Yeah.
And the thought process was that
Sorry, when you say 35 million plus dollars.
dollars.
Okay, thank
to
you. I just
fund-
want to make sure we're clear.
Yeah, so let's bifurcate the issues like, so this minor extension that Chris approved is a low level risk for the district. The subsequent one is a big deal because it's 35 million plus. The operating assumption is the executive director from Sandak has articulated one source of funding from somewhere within Transnet. I've been told that it won't be out of the operating money that the transit agencies absolutely depend on. But his proposal also is going to be premised that the transit agencies from their operating budget also contribute to this. And so this is a big deal. When this was pitched to me, I literally did not respond one way or the other way. But, you know, from a practical point of view, the Transnet is a big lift locally. It actually goes back to something that I think is primarily a political consideration about if one, you know, the first test for me is, are you reaching in the transit agency pockets? And remember, we were the agency for the coaster expansion that had the carpet pulled away from under our feet. And so we are not able to expand the services because they said there's no money. If you were to take any of the Transnet money related to the transit agencies, then you're actually talking about cutting service. So then it's the other sources which that will come out, which are significant votes, which may directly impact future votes when we ask taxpayers for money to do other things, right? But then the whole other question is the notion of where transit agencies, MTS or NCTD, would have money to contribute towards free fares. And so it's a big deal discussion. I don't know how much of the 30-something million is the budget request that NCTD would be expected to bring to the table. But my intent is to bring a board action to our board to establish a policy direction around this issue. And I am going to make a recommendation around it because we don't have the money. And the board has an explicit policy around use of one-time money that I think would put, again, in jeopardy for us. Do you want to do these other programs, or do you want to do this going into this 5-year budget forecast that we've talked about? So I want to make sure that we are super duper clear with the board. That's what this discussion is about, because you can't continuously fund us with federal CMAQ money. You're going to have to engage unless, you know, unless the governor says there's a state source of money. But let's also understand most transit agencies are talking about the fiscal cliff. So they're asking the state for money to maintain current operations. And in the windfall budget that the state had last fiscal year, Governor Newsom vetoed the free fare allocation request. So I want you guys to keep all of those things in consideration about the balancing act. It's still, you know, remember we talk about pie? It's just one pie. And unless somebody makes that pie bigger, chopping it up will mean less for someone.
Yeah, totally. And thanks for providing that picture, because I think it's important, and it kind of either added to my questions or answered some of them. But no, I mean, it's important because, as you said, you know, obviously if transit agencies are also going to be part of the contribution of this, let's just say if that arbitrary number is 35 million, then yes, like we have to figure out as an agency how much we would, if if we have the ability and what we would be contributing moving forward, right? So I think that is helpful for us to keep in context. The other piece is, I think you also hit one of my other questions, is what is the likelihood of this passing in terms of the congestion mitigation and air quality improvement program funds being utilized? Because that's a political question, which I know you might not be able to answer, but it's one of those things where I also am curious to know what is that likelihood, because then does it fall back on the transit agencies to then, that's another question I'm just curious about, is like, if we do decide, hey, from a policy perspective, this is important to us, but we can't agree upon this funding mechanism, then there's going to have to be a different funding mechanism that we utilize to continue that program, obviously.
Yeah, so the CMAQ money is what's talked about for for the current program and the short-term extension. And, I think as Chris Slott had it, that these are federal highway dollars that have a flexible component that allow you to use it for certain transit purposes. And but it's not a continuing source. So you could not permanently fund a program with it. And I would just tell you, as your executive director, I would very much caution about the look and feel of what color of money we use for different tools, because it could become not just local issues, but it could become a national discussion issue about how dollars are utilized. And again, that's the inherent challenge of when you're trying to do something one time, is where is the source of money coming from? And then if you're going to try to string it out, what happens next? And so I think from a practical point of view, when on this particular short-term agreement, we see the risk profile less, but we do think it's important that Sandag get a formal approvals, that say, hey, everybody's comfortable with use of the CMAQ money. But the $35 million has not been discussed as CMAQ money. It's been discussed as Transnet money plus money coming from the transit agencies.
So, and just for clarity, because there's a lot of different ideas floating around. So there's kind of three levels of this, right? There's a 2-month extension, which would be from July 30th through August, to allow time for Sandag to work through its board approvals and identify funding. So that's sort of what's on the table now. As Matt indicated, low risk for us. We intend to move forward with that. We're just trading documentation with Sandag right now. There's a time extension that Sandag has proposed for 12 months at the current 18 and under. And then there's the proposal, which hasn't formally come forward yet, but is the expansion of the program to 24 and under. So sort of 3 levels of next steps on YOP.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna have to take it one step at a time. I mean, I think obviously having the third option would be great, the expansion of 24 and under, but given it sounds like we have quite a few steps before we actually could even get there to even see what kind of sustainable source of funding would be utilized for this moving forward, which is what I was also curious about. I mean, what were the current funds being utilized for this in order to pay for this program?
Our understanding is this the CMAQ dollars that have been.
So it was the CMAQ dollars. So they would just be utilizing that for that 2-month extension again, just to keep. Okay, got it. Okay. So hopefully that won't be a hard sell. And then one of the other questions I had was, I mean, obviously we might not have these answers, and it sounded like maybe you might have answered this during your presentation, but just curious. Is there enough funding to support up to 24 and under? I guess the reason why I bring this up is what percentage of riders are currently 19 to 24. I mean, obviously, when I was going to UCSD, if I had the frequency that I would have wished for, sorry, I'm just going to say that. It made it much easier for me to obviously take the coaster down. I drove because of that, so I had that flexibility, but and I know that I could have taken the 101, but it would have added so much more time. So just curious from, that perspective, given that, yes, we have a lot of folks that might either be, taking the coaster down to their job or up to their job or to a university. There could be a good segment of folks that are 19 to 24, but just first, number one, what percentage of riders are 19 to 24 would be really helpful. But then also, is there enough funding to support that 24 and under? Because now we're adding in another chunk of the demographic, right? So I'm just curious about those.
The
pieces.
second part of your question is the easy one. We don't have any source of funding to contribute to subsidize that.
Mhm.
You know, that is, you know, that would be something where likely if the board wanted to commit, you would have to commit money coming from reserves to be able to do that. So that's the clarity on that. I don't know if Mr. Orlando has that 19 to 24 breakdown.
No, I don't have it. I don't have it here to offer. And I will add that we don't have visibility into the 35 million plus or the number, how they arrived at understanding what that population looked like and how they arrived at the number. So I'm not entirely clear, you know, what sort of both the demographic slice of the population that they're targeting and then what the ridership adoption from that demographic would be. We haven't seen that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think since I started on the board, one of the interesting things that I've always wanted to know about is like, you know, just from a millennial perspective, right? Like what are the different demographics and how much are they utilizing each of these different pieces and how much is the marketing working towards each of those different pieces? But one of the things that I also am curious about, and we might not even know the answer to this, but maybe it's something that we think about as we move forward, is what does the demographic shift look like? Like, obviously we as a society track demographic shifts in terms of age and populations. And, you know, everyone says right now there's like a booming, you know, 50 to 65 population. But as we continue to progress forward, is it that there's going to be a shift towards that 18 to 35? And if it is, then does this make sense? You know what I mean? I'm just trying to like make sense of, as we're trending forward, it might make sense, but I'm just also trying to figure out, okay, when we're putting our money towards this, I guess I'm just trying to put all the pieces together, you know?
No,
So-
and I think so. Let's pivot back to our Deloitte study, right? And like most things, an element to achieving our program, you know, our goals, reduce fare or free fares is a part of a strategy, right? But it doesn't overtake the need for us to have better, higher quality service that actually meets the needs of customers, right? And so the answer is clear there. We have a lot of work to do to make the system better so that we can attract more riders than what we do today. And that's why I said, you know, this whole discussion is a little bit off with all of the shifting, you know, demographics and the way people travel. And you're already seeing another shift in terms of employers now starting the process that I think will, over the next 5 years, see more and more people returning to the office, at least 4 days a week. So that's at flux. But what is not in flux is that the expectation is better service. Just like you just identified in terms of when you did that trip. When you start thinking about that, it's going to have more flexibility patterns, which means then your service frequencies for the coaster has to be such, or the Sprinter has to be such that when you have that you can walk out to the vehicle and it's going to be there. You don't have to wait for a couple of hours. So all of the data is in on that. We need to invest in improved service, more safe, more secure, more technology based, more easier to use service as the top priority. Then everything else is kind of secondary to that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think the, you know, quality of service is 100%. Just being able to have that frequency, that reliability is I think key, especially I think it spans all age demographics. So I think just being able to have that is important. But yeah, the only reason why I asked that is I've always been curious to know what our age breakdown is, because obviously marketing is different for each demographic. Like if I see something, it's going to be different than it's what it's going to be when my parents see something. And, you know, it's just a matter of trying to understand what are we doing to make sure. And then, of course, bridging the gap in terms of the Youth Opportunity Pass. I mean, I obviously am 100% supportive of the Youth Opportunity Pass. It makes sense. And I think what I'm trying to figure out is, okay, we want to make it happen. How do we make it happen? And then are we meeting the needs of those that we think we're identifying? Because at the same time, we could be having this huge demographic shift and we may not know it. And we're trying to solve a problem that may not exist, if that makes sense. So obviously it does exist right now, but as we continue to move forward, does that mean that then this demographic ends up shifting again, is my question. Like, I'm trying to think ahead, you know, because obviously it did shift in terms of us wanting to make it so it's more inclusive. And so how do we then continue to plan financially for that? So, thank you.
Okay, Director Contreras, I think I see you looking at me.
Yes, I do. I definitely
Is
have
that-
some questions.
Is that the look?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a good look though.
Okay.
Just excellent questions thus far. And I kind of want to piggyback off of Vice Chair, Bhat Patel. And I just want to ask a fundamental question about how much would it cost to have a marketing study of 19 to 24?
Well, I don't have that magic number, but it's a detailed survey. In fact, Sandak does a survey, I think every 3 to 5 years, where they go through for both in MTS and NCTD, and they capture all of the demographic groups. And so what we should do is we'll go back and check to see when the next time, unless, Sandak is going to do that it's an onboard survey, and that will yield that information that I think is reasonably reliable if we get a large enough data sample, because in prior years, we were not capturing enough data to actually make it valid from a decisional point of view. And so again, if you pivot back into what we did with the Deloitte study, that's more of a market-based assessment, more of a tool that you would use kind of from a private sector perspective.
Right. And how much was that though? Approximately, because I can't remember.
That was pretty expensive.
Can you give me a ballpark figure?
It's well north
Can't
of $700,000.
Okay.
And I think you would be off if you figure that you're gonna, that you get a specific onboard survey and it gives you that yield, because that's not going to be the full story for the district. So the full story for the district is, if you look at it from a practical point of view, how many riders can we attract, right? And that's more of a modal share, question that also is tied to the quality of service. And so to me, where we keep getting it wrong is we keep having circular discussions that are premised upon having high performing, high quality service. And so this is where we're off again with the discussion, because the discussion, so if we were debating about how great we were, that it was just like, we got everything, in fact, it's so great, let's do less great. We're not near that discussion, right? And so, but we're having this discussion on about something that is secondary to actually achieving the goal of getting people to make a significant shift towards public transportation. And so really the way we are engaging in this discussion is misdefining the discussion. The real question is, where do you want to put your priorities first? Where do you want to put your dollars of investment? So you can't put them in every location because you don't have that many dollars. So is your top priority getting to higher quality service right now? Or as soon as we can, because it's going to take years of sustained investment to get there? Or do you want to do one-time activities? Because there's no discussion that we're having here that says anybody has any idea of a permanent source of funding. So the worst thing that any board could ever do would be to take a large tranche of money to spend for a one-time activity without any plan to have it sustained. So I think what I want to do, again, you may disagree with me on this, because I need to push this discussion back in a different way. You need to figure out, what is your priority? Is your priority the implementation of microtransit, implementation of the bus rapid transit, improve frequencies, improve safety and security, and improve use of technologies? Those are the top priorities for the board. And then secondarily to that, we want to be able to do these things that we can help grow the ridership. But the conditions precedent is high quality, high performing service, right? I think we all agree with that as a premise, but we're not having that discussion. We're having the secondary discussion as if we have a plan to get to, we have a plan, but we don't have funding to get to where we need to do first.
It's a little chicken and the egg.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, the reason that I understand where you're coming from, and I too am going to push back on it though, because here's the thing is that we can spend money on marketing, but we're not getting the same type of data that we get when we do a pilot program. I think that now that we have the 18 and under, right, we have this incredible information, and it also provides the conditions to test the system. Because I will tell you, and I will continue to tell you, that the 303 bus, even when it's not in peak hours, has a good amount of people riding it. And when I wait for the bus over here, I'm usually waiting with a few youths, right? So and I also see this under the policy considerations, equity, right? Fairness of providing an age-based universal benefit rather than a targeted needs-based program. But I liken this to the 18 and under. I'm going to talk about just that. 18 and under, it is an equity issue because we don't have free schooling just for individuals who are needs-based. We have a free school option for everybody. And I think that if we're really looking at equity, it doesn't matter if your parents make $250,000, they might not care to take you somewhere.
But, and again, I think everybody knows we're kind of engaging in a little, but that doesn't pay the bill. So what you're talking about is aspirational. And I have to balance budgets at the end of the day. So from my perspective, this is a question that if the body politic views this as a priority, then the body politic needs to identify a stable source of funding to implement it, because otherwise it doesn't work within the budget framework. So it's a circular discussion, but at the end and the beginning of it is, what is your source of revenue to pay for?
And the 18 and under is how much annually?
I have no idea.
It's like 6 to 9 million, right?
Yeah.
That's relatively a small amount of money for all jurisdictions to get this benefit. So I think that when we're talking about 18 and under, it is not pie in the sky. I think when we move to the next tier of 19 to 24 is where we really have to figure out how we're going to pay for that. But if you're telling me that we can't find between $6 to $9 million annually as a county and all the jurisdictions represented by that county to keep 18 and under free, as well as pushing on the state and federal levels to get a little bit of funding, I disagree with that. I think that it is such a small amount of money relative to the benefit that we're receiving. I understand your point when it comes to 19 to 24 and a $35 million and growing, right? Because all these numbers continue to grow as inflation grows. I understand your reluctance there. I also understand from your perspective the reluctance of 18 and under, but I don't think that that is a difficult thing for us to fund permanently. And the more will that there is from the community to continue that, the more we'll be able to push on our elected officials to also have the political courage to stand up to real issues that are happening right now, which transportation continues to increase. The privatization of transportation is incredibly inaccessible for a large part of our population. So I will say that if we're going to consider equity, 18 and under is 100% in line with the consideration of equity. The next tranche of 19 to 24 is what's going to be really difficult. I do believe in it. I think actually transportation should be free, and we need to move to a system where we can not have to worry about funding it, right? That's ideal. But I don't think having 18 and under free is some kind of like utopian idealism. I think that it's realistic to meet the goals and challenges that we have right now, not only as a transit agency, but as economic opportunity in our community. So, for me, I think it's like important to bifurcate those two and look at, the next tranche of 19 to 24, that's going to be really, really difficult for us, because I agree with you. We can't use one-time monies. But if we did do a one-time pilot program for 24 and under, I think the type of data that we would see in the stress test of the system with that type of perhaps 11% increased ridership in that group, what does that do to our system now? Because the 18 and under, I see it as a great way, as someone who uses public transportation, I see it as a great way to test the system and how we currently are really missing opportunities when it comes to the frequency, the reliability, the safety concerns. And we can see it happen, manifest in real time, and we can have these discussions about the gaps that we see. And until we have pilot programs that illustrate to us in real time how an increase in ridership means that we have to look at these different strategies to continue that increase in ridership, I think that there's a lot of benefit from doing a one-time pilot. I understand, we're not going to go out there saying that this is a permanent program, right? It's been very clear the way it's been articulated to the public. These are pilot programs, but I do think that continuing the 18 and under, we can find a way to do that. If it involves needing local jurisdictions to get involved and school districts to get involved to see how we can work together to fund this, I don't think that's a big hurdle to overcome. But when it comes to 24 and under, I think that being able to have a one-time pilot program to just see how that affects our system is extremely valuable to what our future goals are. If we actually want to see what it looks like when people start shifting their mode away from a single occupancy vehicle to public transit. But I understand your concerns. I totally understand your concerns, which is why I really look forward to having more discussions about what we need to do, because I think we all need to get educated to a high level about TDA reform and fare box recovery reform so that we can put the necessary pressure, because it's not fair. All of us met during COVID, but for TDA reform to not meet during COVID, and I don't even know when their next meeting is, that's not okay for me. And I want to be able to put the type of pressure we need on that. So anyways, that's all I have to say. And then when it comes to fiscal cliffs too, for transit agencies, I think there's a big difference between looking at something like San Francisco, where you have essentially a dead city because there's so much office space and little housing in that area. It's different than here, because here we have a lot of housing and our industry is kind of spread out. And as we continue to couple transit stations with more housing, I think it's a little bit of a different situation. But I know MTS has they have like a projected $50 million deficit. So I understand, but I want to push back on the 18 and under. I don't think that is pie in the sky. The 24 and under, the 19 to 24 is something that we seriously have to consider about how we're going to pay for that. But I do believe that a one-time pilot program could give us invaluable data and really be a realistic way of looking at how our transit system can operate in 10 years from now, if we do have a mode shift that we want. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Jenkins.
I think just 4 questions. Do we know if the MTS results are similar to what we have? Do we have any idea on that?
They're consistent. Yeah, they're consistent in region wide. They've also seen pretty strong results from the youth opportunity pass as well.
Okay. And then
Sharon, can I qualify your answer a little bit, because we're saying growth. What is the growth compared to pre-COVID?
To pre-COVID.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're having this discussion about COVID recovery ridership, but we're not having this discussion compared to pre-COVID, what was the ridership? Because that's really the Delta base to analyze this. So do you have that information?
I do not have that information.
So we need to gather that information, because former board chair, and he works with me every day. So I'm extremely factual. And this discussion has been anything but a discussion around facts. And so what we need to do is we need to pull the data and present the data, because right now we have talking points. And look, I'm happy. In fact, I was a big supporter of anything that we could do that could help induce riders to come back, kind of as a marketing strategy. But this has taken a life of to its own. So we need to pull that data together.
I will just note that there's a complication in that, so we can pull the data together,
Yeah.
but we transition in the same time frame from the Compass system to the Pronto system, and so there's a little bit of data inconsistency. So the clean data that you're looking for, Matt, could be problematic in the region.
It
just for
was
clarity.
problematic, and we're going to have to pull prior onboard survey information and make some assumptions. But I think we can get to a better assumption of what that number was than what we're presenting, and we need to present more nuance so that elected officials have a better idea. Because right now, if I say million something and everybody goes like, ooh, but we need to make sure we're showing what the actual base of comparison is.
Okay, and then on page 8, it talked about the county expressing support for the program. Was that verbal only or
No,
there's no monetary support?
It was, they passed a resolution, but no monetary. support.
No,
So they
okay.
passed a resolution in support of.
Okay, okay, and then the 35 million that's talked about for the 19 to 24, is that in addition to the 6.6 to 9 million for the under 18, or is that 35 million for everything?
We don't know. So, because, we, again,
You see my point?
I
though?
know, I totally
Are
see
we
your
talking
point.
about 45 million?
Well, and this is part of, I think, the whole dilemma of these things are getting tossed out
Yes.
there without any detail
Okay,
and allowing folks to be able to better understand what we're talking about. And it's really hard. And you understand, because I presented earlier our budget timelines. You can't just throw this out
right.
and say, hey, go figure out how you're going to fund it.
Okay, and then do we know, so I've heard in the past that there's about 3 to 4% of San Diego County residents who use transit approximately. Do we know how much, do we know if the Youth Opportunity Pass riders move that needle at all? Or were some of these already riders? It comes back to the facts,
Yeah,
I
so
think.
the underlying story is ridership hasn't recovered to 2019 levels.
Okay,
So so therefore the mode share has not, that needle has not been moved.
okay.
And as we just alluded to, we need to have a deeper analysis
Yes,
around.
okay.
And-
Okay,
but
we
just-
don't know.
There was the slide in there that showed the proportion of the youth in terms of total boardings. So that gives you some sense of the amount that the youth move the needle. So that's the slice of the pie.
Mm-hmm. The 11%, I think you
Yeah,
said,
six-
of
six
the
to-
total.
Total boardings, correct.
Right, okay. Okay, that's all I had. Thanks.
Terrific. Okay, I have a couple of comments and questions. I obviously definitely support the 2-month extension and hopefully the CMAQ money, if Caltrans agrees, and moving forward on a second year of 18 and under. I do think that we need to definitely pursue some long-term funding for 18 and under, because I agree with Board Member Contreras that 18 and under is almost like a right. If you're going to school, you should be able to, and it's free school, you should be able to actually get to school. Important. So I had the question about county, that's already been answered. Timing, what's the timing, Matt, during the budget cycle to make a policy decision regarding a contribution or carve out for 24 and under?
I think the clock can't even begin until Sandag actually provides real information. And from a practical point of view, if we don't get real information within the next 30 days, it's pretty hard to incorporate something that's like the millions of dollars. And even then, I can tell you there's, my feedback to Sandag or any agency, if you're going to do something like this, there's so much, one, you got to have details. And then the pre-collaboration is usually more than a year out. And let me give you an example. So there's LC top dollars. But all of our LC top dollars are now currently programmed for our zero emission bus program. Now, if we take that source of money, which could be used for underwriting free fares, but then you have a gap because that money is used for also as local match to federal dollars, right? But if Sandak has another source of funding that, you know, could step in for all of that stuff, then you could do a fund swap around the stuff. But that doesn't happen overnight because now those funds are already committed under a contract. And so I'm not optimistic about us being able to incorporate it into any budget because of the amount of collaboration and coordination that needs to take place in advance, because you got to have the ability to know what is the source of funding, and it can't be fake money. It has to be real dollars that are actually going to be available to you. So
what can we as a board do to try to encourage getting this money from elsewhere? I mean, are there specific steps reaching out to our state electeds, reaching out to Sandag and speaking up at like the TC meeting and at the board?
we will give you that information because, you know, there's a bill at the state level to do the for youth, essentially the youth opportunity type program. That's really your best horse. There's no federal program out there. So it's really at the state level. But again, understand that your request will be competing against funds to continue and maintain operating. And maybe you can get both, but I think it's a pretty tough year. Then at local is around sales tax, which would, you know, based upon this Transnet ordinance, would require I think it's a 2/3 vote to reprogram the dollars and a bunch of other rules that I won't pretend to know. So those are the things. That's really where the action is if that program is going to happen, you literally are going to have to redo the Transnet program or count on the state passing or the county providing those dollars. I think the fourth tier is asking each of the cities to contribute a tranche of money towards a program.
Based on population?
That's one way.
Coming from a tiny city with a tiny budget. Okay, so Director Contreras spoke about the need for information, right? Marketing information for 24 and under. Can we create some of our own by doing something like the 24th day of every month, anybody 24 and under rides free? You know, can we make it a week a month, a day a month, you know, on the 20, you know, I mean, we could even do it, whatever, but
you know, we can look at those things. And I don't want to make this meeting, you know, too long, but I need to make sure the board understands. So pilots, so within the transit industry, so one of the reasons people go towards rail is because of permanent infrastructure. And one of the reasons that bus rapid transit became a big and important concept because you create permanent infrastructure. If you do true bus rapid transit, it has like 5 characteristics. If you do those things, you have permanent change. Pilot programs don't create permanent change from people that they don't change behavior. And again, I'm going to keep going back.
well, I think
but we can do those programs,
okay.
but I don't want you to think that you're drawing valid, actionable, long-term decision-making off of doing a 1 week or 1 year 24 and under program. You're not. And that is part of the whole thing. And I think maybe what we should do is in a combination of coming forward with some proposals. So I want to make sure we're as responsive as we can for the board to consider. I do think we need to talk a little bit more about the science of behavioral change, marketing and analysis, because again, I think there's the difference between aspirational and the actual business imperative of achieving an outcome. And we need to close the gap on this discussion. Otherwise, I can tell you exactly what's going to be the case. Is the moment that we have that economic downturn and we need that $5 to $7 million to balance the budget for that year, you're going to be looking that you had 30-something million dollars go out of the door. And so I'm not trying to be.
No, I think we all hear you. I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm-
we listened to the entire meeting, so I think you're
I'm
preaching to the
repetitive.
choir here. No, we understand that there's a lot of balance.
So we will come back, we'll come back and you can guide me on, do you want us to go to NISBA, to the board, to the executive
right.
committee? With those?
Okay, well, I actually missed Ms. Bada because I think that was the most fun committee, subcommittee. So anyway, are we good? It looks like it, and
Just
we've,
briefly.
oh, okay,
Just brief comment on, yes, behavior change does take a lot of aspects. That was something that I studied in school. That was like what my dissertation was on. So yes, 100%. It would be interesting. I mean, obviously it's up to the chair, but I think it would be helpful for the full board to hear at some point. But again, it's up to the chair. I'm just putting my 2 cents out there.
okay. Once again, this was an informational item only, and we got a lot of information going around, but no real data. Which is a good thing because there's no vote required. So we have one closed session item on today's agenda. Before we go into closed session, Suhel, do we have any public comments on closed session?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, Lori A. Winfrey, General Counsel, will now take us into closed session.
My pleasure for my performance review. Thank you, Madam Chair. So closed session today is pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, Public Employee Performance Evaluation for General Counsel.
Okay.
Right. Okay, so the executive committee met in closed session in accordance with the general counsel's employment agreement and NCTD board policy number 3 to evaluate general counsel performance. The executive committee rated general counsel's performance as exceeding expectations, and a proposed performance-based incentive payment will be agendized and considered by the full board at its March 16th, 2023 regular meeting. That concludes my report out.
Thank you. Suhail, do we have any remaining public comments?
Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Our next scheduled meetings are the regular board meeting on March 16th, 2023 at 2 p.m. The REC committee meeting, March 20th, 23 at 10 a.m. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you. You didn't even have to buy them.